special report. Donald Trump on trial, and at last, the blockbuster witness in this blockbuster case taking the stand. Michael Cohen telling a jury straight up he was just following Mr. Trump's directions when he paid a former adult film star for her silence during the 2016 campaign. Want to show you what we just saw. The former president leaving court in just the last couple of minutes here. He did stop and speak to reporters on his way out. He did not say the words Michael Cohen, but he did go after what happened inside court today. That explosive testimony from the man who's just as much at the heart of this case as Mr. Trump is. Remember why he's important here. Prosecutors think Cohen can connect all the dots back to Mr. Trump himself. With Cohen, this former advisor turned adversary who worked for Mr. Trump for decades as his personal lawyer. I know you've heard the phrase fixer turned foe. That's really what he is at this point. Cohen's the guy who paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet over allegations she had sex with Mr. Trump. The former president says that didn't happen. And Cohen went to prison for doing it. He pleaded guilty and served 3 years for federal campaign finance schemes related to this alleged scheme. Cohen says his boss, who was at the time, of course, the Republican candidate, told him women are going to hate me if it came out, that it would be horrible for the campaign, catastrophic. That's why Cohen says Mr. Trump pushed him to pay Daniels. Testifying, his boss said, there's no reason to keep this thing out there. And this is important. Just do it. That's what Cohen says Donald Trump told him. Cohen said straight up he would not have paid Daniels if his boss didn't want it because, in his words, everything required Mr. Trump's sign-off, and he wanted the money back. All of this is key. Why? Because to make this a felony, right, to bring these felony charges against the former president, prosecutors have to prove there's some underlying crime to these 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. That's what Mr. Trump's pleading not guilty to. The prosecutors call it an election interference scheme. The defense, boy, they are probably licking their chops, waiting for their turn to go after Cohen. They say he's got no credibility, that he's a liar, that he's out for revenge. Literally, he wrote a book called Revenge. They're going to get their turn later this week. But over the course of the next 20 minutes right here, we're going to take you inside all those rooms cameras couldn't be in for every key element coming out of court, what it means, and importantly, why it matters, why Michael Cohen is so central here. We've got our team of reporters and legal and political experts that have you covered, ready to break it all down. I want to start with Vaughn Hilliard, who's outside court in Manhattan. Okay, so big day, big moment. We called it a blockbuster moment, and it is, right? And what prosecutors got today was basically this first-person look at what went down with the Stormy Daniels payment and why Michael Cohen is so important. Because in the eyes of prosecutors, and from what Cohen said on the stand today under oath, he puts Donald Trump in the room talking about this payment scheme.
I took the directions of Donald Trump, were the words of Michael Cohen. He testified to this jury that he was simply working as a middleman for Donald Trump. Ahead of the 2016 election, he said that a foremost concern for Donald Trump was the impact that the news, the salacious details about his alleged affairs with Karen McDougal, the former Playboy playmate, as well as Stormy Daniels, the adult film star, would have on the election that he was actively running in. He was specifically asked about Melania Trump. Michael Cohen said he was talking with Donald Trump about his concern, and he made it clear that Melania was not his concern. Instead, it was the impact that it could potentially have on women voters. And so this was the type of testimony that the jury heard from Michael Cohen here today, that Donald Trump was so intimately involved in directing him to make sure that these women were paid off to not publicly share their stories.
There was also this rare moment where prosecutors literally rolled the tape on this call that apparently was secretly recorded between Michael Cohen and Mr. Trump talking about this payment back in September of 2016 to Karen McDougal, who was then a Playboy model. Let me play that.
I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to pay?
Funding. Yes. When it comes time for the financing, which will be...
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
Don't pay for cash.
No. I got... No.
Why does this matter? It's an example in the eyes of the prosecution of how over and over again Michael Cohen was laying out this pattern of panic in the campaign when these negative stories came up, and as Mr. Trump is somebody who was kind of a micromanager in getting involved with this stuff.
Right. This is important because initially it was David Pecker in the National Enquirer that paid $150,000 to Karen McDougal. And David Pecker was frustrated that Donald Trump hadn't paid him back the $150,000. And so that is why Michael Cohen says that he recorded that conversation so that he could go show David Pecker that he was doing his part to try to get Donald Trump to hand over the money there. And that is where you see the prosecution asking Michael Cohen today, what was the conversation about? To which Cohen responded, David had stated that it's going to cost $150,000 to control a story, to which Mr. Trump replied, no problem, I'll take care of it, which is, again, Michael Cohen showing that Donald Trump knew he owed $150,000. But that's where the Stormy Daniels payment came in. David Pecker said, I'm not paying $130,000 to another woman just to go and not get reimbursed. And that's what led Michael Cohen to personally paying Stormy Daniels the $130,000 out of his own pocket.
Okay, so we've talked about why Michael Cohen is so critical here. Some of the key moments, right? The line, just do it, that the former president directed Cohen to do in the testimony of Cohen here, putting Donald Trump in the room, having these conversations. Take us inside the courtroom, though, today, because Michael Cohen walks in, right, now facing his former boss, and to say there's bad blood between these two is like an understated cliche, right, because there really is. I mean, we talked about ally turned antagonist, and that's the dynamic here. Seemed like Michael Cohen was kind of nervous at first, loosened up, but then Donald Trump had his eyes shut for, like, long periods of time. We don't know if he was asleep or what, but that seemed to be the case. Talk us through that.
Right. This is, I mean, these two, their relationship began back in 2007, Hallie, and he was working as an executive vice president of the Trump organization. He kind of fixed everything for Donald Trump. He was his go-to man. And this was a relationship, though, that crumbled after the 2016 election when Michael Cohen said he wasn't getting paid that $130,000. And that is when he went to Donald Trump and they came up with the plan, he says, in order to get those reimbursement checks while Donald Trump was in the White House. But in 2018, when this became public, Donald Trump said, Michael Cohen did all this himself. I didn't know anything about it, which led Michael Cohen to ultimately being the center of a federal investigation, pleading guilty and serving more than a year in prison. These two men haven't seen each other in person since Michael Cohen was in jail for what Donald Trump is being alleged as underlying crimes as part of this case here. And so for these two men, you saw Donald Trump walk out. He was angry while talking with reporters and cameras outside. But Michael Cohen, he has been very public about his animosity and his desire to see Donald Trump behind bars. And all this came out to the forefront for this jury to watch unfold with their own eyes, Hallie.
Vaughn Hilliard live for us there in downtown Manhattan as we see former President Trump walking out of court. We understand in the last couple of minutes he has made his way back to Trump Tower. More court tomorrow, of course. We know you'll be there, Vaughn. Thank you. Let me bring in now our legal experts, NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, former Maryland Assistant Attorney General Debbie Hines. Debbie, let me start with you. So far, and we know that the prosecution is not done with Michael Cohen yet, but so far, did he do what the prosecution needed him to do? And do you think the jury believed him?
Well, to answer the first question, he definitely did what the prosecution asked him to do. I mean, I was a little bit nervous about him being the witness, the star witness as a former prosecutor, because he's just a man unto himself. He's going to do what he wants to do, even after repeated instructions by the prosecution not to go online and to post anything. But the prosecution kept him tight. They kept him short and sweet. They actually spent so far less time with Michael Cohen than they did with Stormy Daniels. I think they learned their lesson from what they did with Stormy Daniels. So they've gotten the elements out, what they need to do with him. And he has performed, not to use it in a poor sense of the word perform, because he's telling what his story is, but he has basically stayed right where he should be. Just tell the facts.
He was apparently, too, prepping extensively for this, right? I mean, this wasn't his first time hearing some of these questions.
No, and he was probably, you know, prepped long before, even up until this weekend. So they didn't just start prepping him this weekend. It's been an ongoing process because he's the glue that holds together their entire case.
You know, Danny, I asked Debbie about the believability piece of it from the jury, and the believability piece is important here because, as our friend and colleague Tom Winter points out, Michael Cohen just objectively has told a lot of lies, right? He's acknowledged telling lies before to congressional committees, Robert Mueller, multiple federal prosecutors, FBI agents, the judge to whom he pled guilty, several in his own book. I mean, you see the web of it here. How much of an issue is that going to be, do you think, from the jury? Because we know the defense is going to go at that hard when they get their turn, possibly tomorrow or maybe Thursday.
It's an issue, but we have to take a step back and look at Michael Cohen in the spectrum of cooperating witnesses. These are usually people, even though he's not technically a cooperator, these are people that usually are convicted of crimes that are much more serious than those which Michael Cohen's been convicted of. These are users of firearms. These are drug dealers. These are people who are brought to the courthouse in shackles and prison garb. So just for some perspective, Michael Cohen is hardly the worst cooperating witness type that prosecutors have had to deal with. They've dealt with a lot worse. He's got
You're saying there's no
credibility.
such thing as like a Saint, a Mother Teresa cooperating witness, basically, that's like a pipe dream for a prosecutor.
Well, by definition, an insider is somebody who was involved in the bad things that you're trying to get the other guy for the bad things. So, yes, I mean, almost by definition, a cooperating witness is someone who has usually taken responsibility to some degree. They have to, pleaded guilty, been found guilty, and they have done bad things with the defendant. That's how they know about the bad things, because they did them too. And that's what Michael Cohen is. Normally, I mean, most prosecutors have dealt with crimes that are far more serious and far more violent, involving drugs and firearms. So Michael Cohen, yes, he's got credibility problems. But here's the thing. Cooperating witnesses are used all the time because they work really, really well. Jurors are able to look past all the foibles and the flaws of a cooperating witness, including their credibility issues, and believe their story.
So, Debbie, that brings me to an exchange that feels important to this point today, right? Because prosecutors repeatedly seem to know that they needed to confront some of these credibility questions head on themselves before letting the jury hear it for the first time from the defense. And there was this moment where, in one exchange, Michael Cohen said he lied for Mr. Trump because, quote, it's what was needed to accomplish the task, that's why he did it. In your view, is that enough for the jury to accept?
Well, I think he's going to go further with the testimony tomorrow in terms of his lies and what he's done and not told the truth in so many, many instances. So it won't just be a matter of that. But here's the thing. They also have the security. They've got the security of having the phone calls, the phone call
receipts,
records,
the texts,
receipts,
the documents.
Yes,
right?
they have it. They're not relying solely on Michael Cohen, which sometimes you have to do as a former prosecutor. If it's a jailhouse snitch, that may be the person, the only person you have to rely on. They're not going to have the records. They're not going to have the goods. So, no, he's not the whole case. There is corroboration, so to speak, with his own testimony that the jury will see.
Danny, Cohen, we talked about why he's important here, right? The one who can connect the dots back to Donald Trump, the one who can put him in the room. So there is this moment where Cohen says that Mr. Trump promised he would get reimbursed for paying Stormy Daniels. Is that a smoking gun? Did we see a smoking gun today based on Cohen's testimony?
It's not so much a smoking gun, because I think of that as like the nail in the coffin, if we're going to mix all our metaphors. I think of that as the
Keep them coming, man. We
proof.
can't hack it up enough here. Thank you.
The conclusive proof. So I don't know that it was a smoking gun, but it is so key. It is, this trial all comes down to just a couple of moments. And you're right, that was one of those moments. Now, whether or not it's to be believed, that's up to the jury. It could be a smoking gun for the jurors if they find Michael Cohen credible. But I totally agree with you. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecution takes that line and blows it up on a PowerPoint, because, Hallie, I want to tell you now, prosecutors love PowerPoints. They love bullet point, lots of words, lots of subheadings and all kinds of things. You will see that probably in closing, and you might see that line that you just quoted right in there in that PowerPoint.
There was somebody who came up today that we heard a lot about, Allen Weisselberg, who, of course, is the now convicted former CFO of the Trump org, who's also in the middle of these alleged hush money payments. At one point late in the day, actually, right as we were coming down to the studio, Michael Cohen was talking about how he and Mr. Trump were like frickin' frack, in his words. They were thick as thieves, super close. We're not expected to hear from Weisselberg on the stand in this trial. Explain that.
Yeah, I was in court on Friday when this actually came up, and the prosecution revealed that they didn't even try to subpoena him. They have no intention of calling him. And the reason is this. There are too many risks in calling Allen Weisselberg. They really won't know what he would say, if anything at all. He's obviously, I would say it appears obvious that he's still loyal to the Trumps, so he may not be that helpful. And I'm sure they concluded that the risk wasn't worth the benefit. They can get everything they need from other witnesses. After all, Allen Weisselberg's handwriting appears on documents. Once you authenticate that, you put the document in record. And as far as they're concerned, the paper, the document, is better than the eyewitness or the witness's testimony, which may have, again, credibility problems.
So then, Debbie, quick final thoughts to you here as we set the table for tomorrow, with Michael Cohen expected, obviously, to continue taking the prosecution's questions. And then at some point, it will be the defense's turn for the cross. What do you expect?
Okay, the cross is going to take an enormously long time. It's definitely, I think, going to take longer than the direct because they just wanted to keep it as tight as possible. But the cross...
They meaning the prosecution.
They meaning the prosecution, yes.
Yep.
But the defense, they have all these many inconsistencies and lies that he's told for many, many years, even before the transaction and after the transaction. So they're just going to have a field day with him.
Debbie Hines, thank you. Danny Savalos here with us in Washington. Thank you, Debbie. Danny Savalos back in New York. Thank you very much. There's lots more to talk about here as it relates to the politics and, interestingly, the relationships of all of this, right? So I want to bring in some of our political journalist experts, if you will. Wall Street Journal senior political correspondent Molly Ball, Politico senior legal affairs reporter Josh Gerstein, and Atlantic staff writer David Graham. And, David, let me start with you, the relationship piece of it. There was this interesting moment where Cohen got real fired up, kind of ticked off, that his bonus was less than he expected at one point, that he was bummed to not be given a White House job. You've got Mr. Trump, who famously likes to think of his attorneys as these Roy Cohns, right? Guys who would do anything for him, guys who would push every limit, push every envelope to get stuff done for Donald Trump. The deterioration of this relationship is in so many ways front and center as these two men are facing each other in court.
That's right. And anyone who dealt with Michael Cohen, before he was a household name, remembers what a bulldog he could be, how fierce he would be in defending Trump. And you saw him on the stand today talking about, his sort of pride in working for Mr. Trump and his desire to please him. So this is something we've also seen so many witnesses, almost a comical procession of them, talking about how much they hated Cohen and how difficult he was to deal with when he was doing these things for Trump.
Even as they were talking like a billion times a day. I mean, that was what was also so striking here, was seeing the flurry of text and conversations and calls between all of them, despite whatever bad blood there may be now. And Molly, as this is all going down, you've got people physically sitting in court today. And again, no cameras in court, so we can't show it. But some of the former president's closest allies in Congress, people who are now, and this is becoming like a pilgrimage of sorts, making the trek from Capitol Hill, just a couple blocks from where we are, up to the courtroom. Senators J.D. Vance, Tommy Tuberville there. His son Eric Trump has been there as well. Let me play a little bit of what two of those guys said. Listen.
I'm here for the simple reason to show support for a friend. I think this trial is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's a sham prosecution.
I'm here, Mr. Trump. He is former President Trump. Give him some respect.
It's interesting, Molly. Donald Trump can't go after Michael Cohen because of this partial gag order the judge put in place. Those senators have no such gag order restricting their speech.
That's right. And his friends are there to show their loyalty to him and to say the things that he can't say. And it really shows you how he has really completely seamlessly merged his political campaign with the defense he's putting on in this trial. It is one and the same case that he is making. It's about the witch hunt. It's about him versus the establishment, him versus the system. And so the case that he's making inside the courtroom, it has really become the case he's making outside the courtroom to the electorate, to the sort of ultimate jury of his peers that is going to convene in November and going to decide whether they believe the things that he's saying in court.
And can we just real talk here for a second, Josh? We don't know. I mean, everybody asks a question. I get it. I'm sure you both get it. I'm sure David gets it. What does this mean to voters? We don't know. There's not a verdict yet. We don't even know what other trials are coming up. And just to remind people, this is one of several, obviously, potential trials that the former president faces, although they all, except for this one, seem unlikely to actually go to court before the election come November, depending, of course, on how the Supreme Court rules before the end of June. How do you see it? I mean, when you're talking to folks, when you're doing the reporting, like, how do we think about that piece of it?
Well, I mean, there's definitely some polling that suggests that some voters could peel off of former President Trump if he's convicted in either this current case or some of the other cases. But as you're alluding to, Hallie, that's a weird question to kind of poll voters on. It's like a hypothetical event that hasn't happened yet. If a meteor came from space and hit us on Tuesday, how would you vote in the election in November?
I'd be bummed, right? I mean,
people would be upset, but what's the connection? And there's other kind of wiggle words in the polls, like a serious crime. Part of it is what happens at the end of this trial. One thing I still haven't heard from the prosecutors is them clearly laying out the case that elevates the crimes here from a misdemeanor to a felony, that this was designed in some way to evade campaign finance laws. And that's what they have to do sometime between now and whenever they close their case, which could be at the end of this week.
Pull on that thread just a little bit here, because that is what is underlying all of this, right? Prosecutors have to prove something else, and they are making this essentially an election interference case. He's not charged with that. The charges are very specifically falsifying business records. But explain by what you're talking about why that is so important here.
Well, to take it from a bookkeeping case, which is basically a misdemeanor, to a felony, it has to be done. These false entries that you were discussing earlier have to be done in some way to prove or to push forward some other violation of law. And the prosecutors indicated at the beginning of the trial that they were going to say this is a violation of New York State election law, that two people conspired, but they haven't really laid that part out just yet. Now, they are trying to link it to the election. The testimony today from Cohen saying it wasn't so much Melania, it was more about the election, and the fact that Cohen felt that Trump was trying to drag this out past the election, then he wasn't going to pay. If he wasn't going to pay after the election, then, you know, clearly does seem to have something to do with him wanting to stay clean in the minds of voters. And so they're making those links. I still don't think they've quite made the final campaign finance fraud here, that they were trying to cover up the payment in some kind of finance report, which I think they may need to do by the time they get to the end of this case, if they want felony convictions.
And so as we talk about, and as David, as Josh has pointed out, and as Molly has alluded to here, you know, the polling is based on a hypothetical if he is convicted. Now, we may know the answer to that possibly in the next 3 weeks based on the pace of this trial, based on the timeline of what the expectation is. But as this is all happening, Donald Trump is running for president now, right? He is, you know, campaigning to a degree. He's off of court, of course, on Wednesdays. He'll be off this coming Friday for his son's graduation from high school. And the reality is he has an advantage over President Biden in some key swing states. We're seeing that in this new polling out from the New York Times today, showing him ahead in states like Arizona, Georgia, Nevada. How do you see that in the context of this campaign?
Well, I mean, I think one question is how much this trial is really penetrating. You know, what we're seeing is in some ways very compelling, but it's not on video. People can't see clips of the testimony. They can't see clips of Trump sleeping. And so I wonder how much people are following twists and turns. I think the verdict, whether it's guilty or not guilty, is going to filter out, and we'll see how people respond to that. But I think it's still a little bit distant from people, and it's a complicated case to understand for all the reasons that Josh was just explaining.
That's right. David, when you said, you know, how much is this really filtering to voters, Molly, like everybody at this table nodded their heads.
Well, look, there was a really interesting number buried in that New York Times swing state poll. They asked people how closely they were following this trial, and only 29% of Americans say they're following this trial closely. I think for all the reasons you laid out, I think the Trump team certainly feels like they have successfully convinced most people that this is old news. This happened before he was elected the first time, and therefore there's nothing to see here. You know, voters certainly do already have the impression that Trump has been surrounded by sleazy characters, was perhaps a bit of a womanizer, and he's leading in these polls despite that. So on the one hand, I have seen polls that say most voters do think these charges are serious. On the other hand, it's very difficult to follow all the twists and turns, the whole cast of characters. And then you don't have the other side trying to prosecute, to borrow a term, this as part of the political campaign.
You're talking about the Biden campaign, not the prosecutors.
The Biden campaign and Democrats generally have stayed completely away from this, which means that voters aren't hearing an argument in the political space that this is a reason that they shouldn't vote for Trump.
Josh, let me sort of conclude this conversation as we started it with this question of relationships, because you were pointing out something interesting in Politico, that the former president is keeping his legal team, his current legal team, close, despite the many challenges and the many, I think fair to say, blow-ups that he's had with past legal teams here, too. So far, he seems to be liking Todd Blanche and the folks at the defense table with him.
Yeah, I mean, there is a large legal graveyard of attorneys that have worked for Trump that either won't work with him anymore or he won't work with anymore. And so it's kind of fascinating after the withering tongue lashing that one of the defense attorneys, and really a couple of them up in New York, both Blanche and Susan Nicholas, took a really bad pounding from the judge publicly, pretty uncommon in the middle of a trial. I was sitting in the courtroom, and to have them lash out like that is pretty extraordinary. And Trump is sitting there, remember? So he's hearing and watching this very negative review of his own attorneys, and you would think most defendants that would shake them and maybe cause them to reconsider whether they have the right lawyers. But in this particular instance, you got to keep in mind who did that review come from? That was from Justice Juan Merchant, who's overseeing the trial, who Trump, I guarantee you, dislikes far more than anybody on his legal team.
That's a good point. You getting back up to court anytime soon?
I hope so.
All right, Josh, thank you. Molly, great to see you both here in Washington. Thank you for joining us on set. David, we got to get you down here. Thank you very much for being with us for this special report. Appreciate it. We've got a lot of other big headlines tonight. We're going to catch you up on all of it when we pick up regular programming right after the break. Stay with us. We are coming on the air tonight with the tale of two trials, not too far away from where the former president's in court. A New Jersey senator's bribery case is getting off to a slower than expected start today. How Robert Menendez plans to defend himself and whether that means throwing his own wife under the bus. Then, in just the last half an hour, not even, crews in Baltimore, take a look, demolishing a big chunk of that bridge that's been collapsed for weeks now, that cargo ship stuck under it. What this all means for the push to get traffic back into that key port up and running. And how worshipers at a Louisiana church stopped a potential mass shooting. The emotional words today from the priest who was leading the services. Plus, sounds like Netflix may be ready to spend big money for big games, why they reportedly think it's the key to creating so-called cultural moments, and why streaming may be the new cable after all. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight a stunning split screen just blocks from our former President Trump, who's sitting in a courtroom. You've also got New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez's federal bribery trial getting off to an absolute slog. 0 jurors picked after a full day of court that just wrapped up. You see Menendez there leaving court as we're getting our first look at how his defense team plans to make their case. The question on everybody's mind, will Senator Menendez throw his own wife under the bus to try to prove his own innocence? The senator is facing a grand total of 18 federal charges, most of them felonies, related to allegations he accepted gifts for political favors. Menendez's wife is accused alongside her husband, although her trial is separate. The gifts are coming in the form of all this stuff. Investigators said they found stuffed in clothes and closets around the senator's house in Jersey, nearly $500,000 in cash, gold bars, a Mercedes, all of it allegedly given in exchange for what prosecutors called Menendez's official acts as a lawmaker and as the head of the powerful Foreign Relations Committee. I don't know if you remember this, but NBC News caught up with the senator the day those charges were announced, and as calls from his fellow senators to resign were flooding in. Listen to that moment.
Why won't you resign, sir? Senator Menendez?
Because I'm innocent.
What's wrong with you guys?
Why were there gold bars there?
The senator took to the Senate floor a few months later to declare he was entirely innocent of the charges. Ken Delaney is outside court in New York for us. We had reported back in April that Menendez may have been preparing a defense that involved blaming these alleged crimes on his wife. Is there any indication that's still where this is going, or are we still in the absolute, wilderness of jury selection at this point?
We are in the wilderness of jury selection. We won't know about that defense and how far down that road he goes, Hallie, until probably opening statements, which may come at the end of tomorrow, maybe not till Wednesday, because jury selection is taking a really long time. But you're absolutely right. His lawyers in court papers suggested that that is one defense they may pursue. And the reason that's open to them is because a lot of the evidence in this case came from Nadine Menendez and her phone and her text messages. The one thing Robert Menendez seemed to have learned from his last corruption trial is not to put anything in writing, not to send text messages. So there aren't a lot of incriminating texts directly from him, a lot from her, though, and with her arranging for gifts and arranging for official action, allegedly. And the question is, will he try to say he wasn't in the loop on that stuff? Now, this, by all accounts, this is a love match. He proposed to her by serenading to her in front of the Taj Mahal. So it's unclear how far down that road he's going to go. But other defenses his lawyers have proposed is they want to call a forensic psychiatrist who has examined Senator Menendez and who will say that one of the reasons he was hoarding cash in his house is because of his family's long history of having their assets stripped by the government of Cuba. Prosecutors are trying to keep that testimony out. They think it's bogus.
So, Ken, and I want to correct myself, we showed video that was not Senator Menendez walking out of court. He was walking in. He, in fact, may walk out of court in those doors from those doors behind you any second. We have a camera right there in case he does decide to make any comments. You have laid out, capably, Ken, the way that the defense could make their case to try to prove the senator's innocence here. But before we even get to that, a jury has to be selected. There is a point where maybe the thinking went, we'd be in opening statements by the end of the day. We are not even into like juror questionnaires, which is like a step 2 of jury selection. Is this moving surprisingly slowly? Why would that be? Or is this simply the pace of the justice system, or what?
It is surprising. Well, for example, it took a half hour for the 102 prospective jurors to make their way into the courtroom. So perhaps they just weren't equipped for a jury pool of this size. The judge has dismissed, at last count, 38 and is going to bring some more prospective jurors in. A lot of jurors were really balking at the idea of sitting for a 6 to 7 week trial. Who among us wouldn't, right? So they're dealing with that situation, getting the 12 people who are willing to serve. But you're right, they haven't even gotten to the question of what do these people believe? Do they have any biases? And does either side want to exclude them? So this is going to take a while, Hallie.
Ken Delaney will be there, I am sure, for all of it. We'll check back in as this progresses. Thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the first person to get a genetically modified pig kidney transplant is now dead 2 months after that procedure. Rick Slayman got the transplant back in March at age 62. We told you about it then. Doctors say they thought the kidney would last for at least a couple years. As of right now, there's no indication Slayman died as a result of the transplant. His family thanking doctors for giving them, in their words, 7 more weeks with Rick. Number 2, look at this really stunning video. A volcano on a remote Indonesian island erupting this morning. Look at how big that cloud of ash is. Went up 3 miles into the sky. An official there says the situation inside the volcano is so intense right now, more eruptions could come. Number 3, another trespassing incident at Drake's mansion in Toronto. Police say it's the same guy who trespassed last Thursday, who says he came back to get his bike. Remember, there's been a bunch of police activity at Drake's house since last week after a shooting seriously hurt his security guard. That's, of course, as Drake is making a lot of headlines for that beef with Kendrick Lamar. Number 4, maybe another record-breaking Memorial Day travel weekend. Get ready. AAA says 44 million of us will be driving or flying over the holiday weekend, the most the company's seen in like 20 years. Top destinations: Orlando, Seattle, New York. Number 5, Ellen DeGeneres announcing a new comedy special late today that'll come out sometime this year on Netflix. She says it's her last. She's also going to kick off a multi-city stand-up tour next month, saying in a new statement, "Yes, I'm going to talk about it." That's what she said. Variety suggests that may refer to her exit from her show back in 2022 over allegations of a toxic workplace. When we come back, we're going to get right to that breaking news. Those scenes out of Baltimore we just showed you a few minutes ago. Look at that. Crews, there it goes, demolishing a big piece of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. You see it falling right into the water there. We'll talk about what's next as we hit a new phase of cleanup. And a live stream of a church service catching the chaotic moment worshipers helped prevent a mass shooting. Next. Take a look at what's happening in Baltimore right before we came on the air, with crews blowing up part of that bridge that collapsed when a cargo ship hit it a couple months back. Look at this. That was the moment the crews set off explosives to break apart that 600-ton steel beam that was still on top of the Dali cargo ship. Now, remember, that ship's been stuck there ever since this. You know that moment when the ship hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge back in late March overnight.
Dude, this is bad. Like there is no bridge. Like there is no bridge.
That is new video we're getting in body cam from the night that it happened, from Maryland's Department of Natural Resources. The shock. Did you hear that in that first responder's voice? I mean, he sounded shaken up, saying there is no bridge when this happened. The collapse killed the 6 construction workers who had been filling potholes on the bridge last night. Just last week, crews recovered the body of the final missing victim, which is why they moved forward with the demolition today. Ryan Nobles is joining us now. He has been covering that bridge collapse. Tail end now of this removal process. The port has been closed. Timeline now for when things could get back to normal seems to be speeding up now that this really critical part has been demolished out of the situation.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And they took quite a bit of time before they decided to take this kind of dramatic move and accelerate this process by using explosives to remove the remnants of that bridge off of that shipping container that's still locked in the port right now. And part of the reason they waited was because of that search for the remains of the last victim, which they were able to do. And now they believe that this is going to move along a lot quicker. They're now looking at a timeline of anywhere between 3 and 6 months before the port is back open and running. That, of course, a huge step in this process because so much cargo comes in and out of that port. But it's still a very small step in the overall recovery of this area and a new bridge being put in place. The timeline on that is looking more like the end of 2028 before a new bridge is in place. And this is still going to cost millions and millions of dollars. In fact, there are some estimates that it could be $1.5 to $1.9 billion to have the bridge completely rebuilt. And that's going to take a lot of time. You're talking about $200 million worth of cargo that passes through the port of Baltimore every day. There's an estimate that as many as $2 million worth of wages are at stake every single day. So there is a huge sense of urgency to get this process moving.
Urgency, but all, including for, Ryan, the people on the Dolly ship who are still on board, the 21 members of that crew. They have not been allowed to leave since that bridge collapses because of the investigation, because they've been questioned about things. Now that the steel beam is off, what is next for them?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons that they're still on board that ship, Hallie. You mentioned perhaps the most important reason, and that's because they are a part of this active investigation by the FBI to determine what went wrong on that day and if there's any specific culpability, perhaps even criminal culpability that's related to this awful disaster. But then there's also the fact that this still remains a working shipping container. This is a ship that needs crew on board in order to keep it operating and keeping the vessel in place during this period of time. And so there are a number of these crew members on board this ship that are having a lot of anxiety about paying their bills, about being able to take care of their families. Many of them not American citizens. They're from other countries, in fact. And so they would like the opportunity to have their lives move forward. This was a big step in that process. They can't get off that ship until they're able to remove it from the harbor and get it out of that port. This is the next step towards that process. So they're going to be on board until they can get that ship moving. The timeline of that now much further ahead than it was before after they took this step of knocking down those bridge remnants with those explosive devices.
Brian Nobles, thank you very much. To Louisiana now with the reverend of a church there getting choked up today after his congregation avoided a potential mass shooting when a teenager with a rifle showed up at the entrance of the church with about 60 kids inside ready to receive their first communion. Watch. You see the priest and his clergy ducking behind the altar. Turns out worshipers stopped the teen from entering. They took him outside where police arrested him. Church services picked back up as normal today, but listen to how emotional the Reverend got, of course.
And I'd like to pray the Memorare together. Remember, O most gracious Virgin,
Could barely speak there. Priya Sridhar is following this story and joins us now. What else do we know about what happened here, about this teenager, about what went down?
Yeah, Hallie, just terrifying moments captured on camera. As you mentioned, a 16-year-old white male dressed in all black was the suspect that was apprehended. As you mentioned, members of the congregation were able to take him outside, where he was then taken to the Abbeville Police Department, where he was interrogated by police officers there with a parent before he was transported to the Abbeville General Hospital's behavioral health unit for an evaluation. He's now being charged with 2 counts of possession of a firearm for a juvenile and also terrorizing a church. The FBI is investigating this case along with the Vermilion County Sheriff's Office. So there's still a lot of questions about exactly what the motive is, if he had any connection perhaps to the people inside of that church. But that's what we know about the suspect so far, Hallie.
And then obviously the response from the church, just an incredibly emotional moment for so many who were there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you saw on that live stream about 48 minutes into that service, someone walks up to the pastor and whispers into his ear, and he then asks everyone to sit down. And then he starts praying the Hail Mary. And that's when all of that chaos erupted that you guys just saw. But now the church is actually saying that they're going to be having an armed security guard outside of all of their masses to prevent something like this from happening again. But as you saw today, very emotional at the mass there at the St. Mary Magdalene's Church in Abbeville.
It's also not the first time that we've seen, I mean, this shooting, thankfully, was averted, but there have been other deadly shootings at churches, at houses of worship in the last few months and years.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go back to 2012, there was a mass shooting at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin, a Gurdwara, where 8 people were killed. And then you probably remember a few years later in 2015, a shooting at Charleston Church. That one was racially motivated. There was a white supremacist who ended up shooting 9 people and killing them. And then the most significant mass shooting at a house of worship was at Sutherland Springs, where 27 people were killed back in 2017. And then you remember in 2018 at a Pittsburgh synagogue, 11 people were killed. So, you know, this is something that affects all houses of worship, no matter the faith. And a lot of the leaders in these different houses of worship are having to make the tough decision as to whether or not they want to have armed security guards outside of their services, Hallie.
Priya Sridhar, thank you very much for that reporting tonight. Appreciate it. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Western Bureau, local officials ordering a California man to build a 6-foot fence to hide his boat. They didn't tell him how to decorate it, so now look what he did. He commissioned somebody to paint a super realistic painting, basically, of the boat, the thing he was supposed to hide. Pictures already making the rounds online, as you might imagine. Technically, he's complying with the request. Out of our Southern Bureau, a 106-year-old Texas man is now officially reclaiming his title as the world's oldest person to tandem skydive. Al Blaschke first broke the record back in 2020 at 103 years young when he jumped out of a plane to celebrate the college graduation of his twin grandsons. Then a Swedish woman broke his record a couple years later. Now he's like, I'm going to gear up. I'm going to do it again. This time, you see it there with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, both of them skydiving together. And out of our Northeast Bureau, if you're looking to spice up your morning commute, look no further. New York City revealing these limited edition Metro cards to commemorate rapper and Bronx native Ice Spice ahead of her debut album, Y2K. The MTA is selling the cards at select stations across the Bronx and Manhattan starting today. Go get them. I know some of our producers are. After the break, could you call it a royal snub? We'll tell you how the king is creating some controversy in the UK. Over in the UK, King Charles is handing over a big military role to his son. A bit of a controversial move because it makes Prince William the ceremonial leader of the unit his brother, Prince Harry, served with in Afghanistan. Look at that. You see both the King and Prince William appearing together today. Remember, we haven't seen the two of them together publicly in a while, with both the King and William's wife, Princess Kate, in treatment for cancer. Here's part of what King Charles said, handing over his title of Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps.
All I can say is that having had the pleasure of knowing you for so long, I do hope you'll go from strength to strength in the future with the Prince of Wales as your new Colonel-in-Chief. The great thing is he's a very good pilot indeed.
I want to bring in NBC Royal contributor Katie Nichol for more on this. Katie, we're glad to have you. So start with, like, the way palace observers are looking at the significance of the king giving this role to Prince William. How should we be reading it?
Well, given that it's Prince Harry's former squadron, I mean, I think that speaks for itself. I suppose Harry would be thinking, well, if anyone should be getting that very prestigious title, it should be him, because, of course, he fought in on the front line in Afghanistan in Apaches. He served 2 tours of Afghanistan. Yes, William's been a pilot. He piloted with the RAF and then later with Search and Rescue. But I mean, this is a really prestigious title. This is Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps. And, you know, he was awarded a special beret from his father today in a very sort of prestigious ceremony, and, of course, got to fly that Apache. And I can only imagine that Prince Harry, if he's even watching this, will be thinking, right, well, I didn't get an audience with my father, the king, while I was in the UK. I haven't spoken to my brother. He's bypassed the UK without so much as any contact with his family. And I suppose there's a sense of sort of rubbing salt into the wound that a title he would have absolutely loved has gone to his brother. But I suppose that's what comes of being out of the royal family rather than in.
Is it too harsh, Katie, to call this potentially a slap in the face to Harry, or is that what it is?
I think it probably feels like a slap in the face for Prince Harry, to be perfectly honest. But he's not a working member of the royal family, so he cannot take the these titles. You know, if you remember, he wasn't actually able to wear his military uniform for the Queen's state funeral. You know, when you step down, when you relinquish being a working royal, there are a number of privileges that go with that. The uniform is one. The military honours is another. And so it might feel like a slap in the face, but it's just the reality.
So what is the reality now of the relationship between Prince Harry and his father? I mean, you mentioned it, Katie, that when he came and visited for a charity event of his own last week in the UK, he was there. He obviously lives in the U.S. now. He did not see his father. We know that even his charity back here in the U.S., the California AG, apparently considers him and Meghan's charity delinquent because of some record-keeping issues or what have you. So where do things stand with the Harry of it all, if you will, right now?
Well, I think the distance with his family is very clear. I'm told that, you know, while Charles wasn't able to make time in his schedule, you know, he was obviously able to make an appointment with David Beckham, again, possibly another slap in the face for Prince Harry. I mean, Charles attended a very important garden party at Buckingham Palace. That was clearly his priority. And don't forget, he's just had to take time off of work as he undergoes cancer treatment. So he's very keen to resume his official schedule. But when you consider that Harry was over here for 3 days, I think it does seem unusual that no time could be made. You know, obviously the king has a busy schedule, but I think it does show where his priorities are. And his priorities are obviously being back on public engagements, perhaps rather than trying to heal a rift with his son. So on this occasion, it didn't happen. And you mentioned Archewell. This seems to be a bit of a storm in a teacup. We understand that Archewell have filed their tax returns, but there is a cheque that has apparently gone missing in the post. As soon as that cheque is received, I don't think the firm will be considered delinquent. It still seems to have quite a lot of money in its latest accounts and is, as we know, giving out grants. So I expect that that's going to be on the agenda as soon as the Tussexes touch back down in LA.
Katie Nichol, we're glad to see you. Thank you very much for walking us through all of it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the show, Netflix and the NFL, how the streamers taken a page out of the linear playbook by setting their sights on live sports. We'll talk about the field of streams coming up. Netflix could be making its biggest move yet to make more money by getting into the live sports game, looking to get the rights to exclusively stream 2 NFL games on Christmas next season. Netflix management has said live stuff like this gives them a chance to create what they call cultural moments, right? These moments that matter not just to viewers, but to advertisers. It's just the latest in a long list of live event trial runs for Netflix. Back in January, they nailed down a 10-year deal with the WWE to air Monday Night Raw. You've also got the company leaning into live comedy. I'm sure you've seen the clips from the roast of Tom Brady. There have been other specials, too, just recently. Alex Sherman is joining us now. Okay, so Alex, NFL, we've talked about this a lot, right? Football is big business. It is a big deal. It's still a big draw. But Netflix previously, I think one of the Netflix execs last year had said, we don't want to spend a ton of money on live sports. That has obviously shifted, or is at least in the process of shifting. Why?
So, yeah, that was co-CEO Ted Sarandos, who basically said, look, we're not anti-sports. We just haven't figured out a way to make sports profitable. So I can confirm that Netflix is close, I would say, to doing a deal with the NFL for these 2 Christmas games. Deal is not done yet, but I'd say it's trending in that direction. And look, this is another significant step for Netflix, but it's also a baby step. It's 2 games. It's not a package of games like we've seen Amazon buy from Thursday Night Football. So to some degree, you could say, you know what, this is kind of like just another live event, just kind of like their live comedy specials. But this one happens to be a football game. Now, on the other hand, this is their first real foray into live sports. Netflix has kind of danced around this before. They did sign a big deal with WWE, but they called that sports entertainment. So we've been kind of marching on this path to sports and not quite there. Now we're there, if this deal in fact happens. And that's big because it does suggest a future where Netflix does find a more profitable path into traditional sports.
And it's not just Netflix that's there, as you put it, Alex, right? We have a graphic of some of the other deals that other platforms have made. It's all happening as you're also starting to see some of these so-called bundles. I'm old enough to remember when you'd go on cable and you'd have, like, you know, ESPN and TNT and Fox or whoever. You'd get your sports off all these different channels. Now we're getting our sports, potentially, in the next few years, off all these different streamers. Is it just the new cable? Like, is there really a cost savings for customers? Or is this simply a new model that looks a lot like the old one? I promise that's not a loaded question. I'm legitimately curious as to how you see it.
Look, Hallie, my day job's CNBC. Cable still helps pay my salary, so I still remember it well, too. The consumer reality is one that, yeah, we're headed toward this kind of rebundling, which may or may not look something more like cable. But the optionality for consumers is much greater than it was in cable, right? Look, if you are a standard cable customer, you pay one price and you get like 350 networks, and you may not watch 330 of them, but you're getting them anyways. In this new world, you'll bundle for sure. And in fact, Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery just announced a bundle where you get Hulu, Disney Plus, and Max. Well, that's three services. And there will be other bundles that will exist with other different streamers for sure. But it is more consumer friendly because you're paying less and you're getting less. There's just going to be a lot of them out there.
Alex Sherman, super interesting. We'll see how this goes, and I know that you will be reporting all of it out for us here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. We're coming on the air tonight with explosive testimony from a key witness in former President Trump's hush money trial, telling a jury he was only doing what his boss wanted him to. How Michael Cohen says Donald Trump pushed him to pay an adult film star for her silence. And in just the last hour, look at this. Crews in Baltimore demolishing, watch it go down, this big chunk of that bridge that collapsed when a cargo ship ran into it. We're live at the port on the push to get the river now back up and running. Plus, thousands forced to leave their homes in Canada as smoke covers the region, blanketing it because of these huge wildfires. How crews are bracing for what they call a potential last stand. And just in the last half hour, sitting U.S. Senator leaving court after his bribery trial got off to a slower than expected start. How Bob Menendez plans to defend himself and whether that means throwing his own wife under the bus. Then the intensifying sabotage campaign Russia's launching on Ukraine. How Moscow plans to execute on it. Hey, I'm Hallie, and in the last couple hours, we are at last hearing from the blockbuster witness in this blockbuster trial in New York. Michael Cohen taking the stand, straight up telling a jury he was only following Mr. Trump's directions when he paid off a former porn star for her silence during the 2016 campaign. The explosive testimony from a man the former president calls a rat, somebody just as much at the heart of this case as he is. Now, prosecutors put Cohen on the stand because they think he's the guy that can connect all the dots. They think he can put Donald Trump in the room. And remember who Cohen is. He's this former advisor turned antagonist. He worked for Mr. Trump for decades as his personal attorney. He's the guy who paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet over allegations she had sex with Mr. Trump. Former president says that didn't happen. Cohen went to prison for this. Remember, he pleaded guilty. He served 3 years for federal campaign finance schemes related to this. Cohen says his boss, Donald Trump, then the Republican candidate at the time, told him women are going to hate me, that if this Stormy stuff came out, it would be a, quote, disaster for the campaign, horrible for the campaign. He says, a disaster here. That's why Cohen says Mr. Trump pushed him to pay her. Testifying, his boss said, there's no reason to keep this thing out there. Just do it. Cohen said he wouldn't have paid Daniels if his boss didn't want it, because in his words, everything required Donald Trump's sign-off, and he wanted the money back. This is all super important. Why? Because to make this a felony, right, to make these charges against Donald Trump a felony, prosecutors have to prove there's some underlying crime to these 34 counts Donald Trump faces of falsifying business records. He's pleaded not guilty to it. Right now, the defense, boy, they cannot wait for their turn to cross-examine Cohen. They've been saying he's basically got no credibility, casting him as a man out for revenge. Literally, he wrote a book called Revenge. They're going to get their turn later this week. Yasmin Vasugian and Laura Jarrett are outside court in downtown Manhattan. Laura, let me start with you first. You spent some time inside court today watching these two, right, face-to-face to a degree. We understand that the witness, Michael Cohen, may have been a little blocked from seeing Donald Trump's facial expressions. talk us through the color inside. What could we not see that you could?
Hallie, I think a lot of our audience knows Michael Cohen. He's been a regular fixture on cable news for a while now. I got to tell you, that was a different man on the stand. He was calm. He was cool. He was collected. He wasn't rambling. He was speaking slowly. He was being careful with his words. He didn't sort of go off on tangents or go further than he needed to, but he gave prosecutors exactly what they needed in this case, because they do not have any other witness that can actually testify to the crux of the crime, which is the cover-up, which is not just the hush money payoff, but how it was documented, and that Mr. Trump knew of the plan ahead of time. Remember, Mr. Trump has sort of not given a clear explanation of how exactly all these hush money payments came to be, but Cohen got on the stand today and made it clear that he walked him through everything, chapter and verse ahead of time. He said that he kept him apprised of everything because that's the way that he wanted it. And this is really the first time, the first person, any direct evidence that we've ever heard anything like that in this trial, Hallie.
That is so super important, Laura. I'm going to ask you to pull on that thread, because that is why the prosecution has called Michael Cohen to the stand, right? That is why he's their star witness, because he's the dot connector, if you will. He's the one who can put Donald Trump in the room. There is an exchange where Michael Cohen says Donald Trump promised that he'd end up getting reimbursed for paying Stormy Daniels. We showed it at the top of the show, the line where he said, just do it. Donald Trump says, don't worry, you're going to get the money back. Do you think that this is enough of a quote-unquote smoking gun, Laura, from a legal perspective?
It's really hard because it's really a he said on this point, right? I don't know that we'll ever hear the former president testify, but we've certainly heard his denials ad nauseum publicly about this, and he would say that that just never happened. And he also explained today that Cohen explained that this is not a person, the former president, is not somebody who uses emails, right? So there's never going to be an email that sort of backs up what Cohen says. There's probably never even going to be a text message or a tape, because he says he never taped him on this point in particular. And so it's really going to come down to whether the jury can believe his word. And as you documented, this is somebody who has been convicted for lying, someone who has admitted to lying under oath, somebody who lied to Congress. And now the jury is expected to watch him and believe everything he says.
There was a tape, Yasmin, right? Not on the topic that Laura's talking about here, not on the specific Stormy Daniels-related moment, but Michael Cohen, as was laid out in court today, secretly recorded Donald Trump talking about somebody else, a payment back in September 2016 to Karen McDougal, Playboy model, in which it seemed to me the point was to make the case that Donald Trump's kind of a micromanager, that he is like super involved with all of this stuff. Let me play it.
I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to pay?
Funding. Yes. When it comes time for the financing, which will be...
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay for cash.
No. I got... No.
Yasmin, that paints the picture that Michael Cohen wanted to show about Donald Trump, that the prosecution wanted to show.
Yeah, and it shows kind of what he was most concerned about, especially after the Access Hollywood tape was in fact released, right? In leading up to Michael Cohen's testimony, they tried to paint a picture of Donald Trump being a family man, especially with testimony from Madeleine Westerhout and Hope Hicks. But in fact, in this scenario, they talked, for instance, about the fact that he was not at all concerned about Melania Trump. Instead, he was concerned about his female voters with the release of this Access Hollywood tape. He was concerned, for instance, about the fallout from these stories of Karen McDougal and for instance, Stormy Daniels as well. And then within this recording, when they play this recording, I think about how astounding this is for the jurors to hear this type of recording inside this courtroom. It speaks to how the buck really stops with Donald Trump, that he was the man that ultimately was making the decisions when it came to the subsequent payoff, it seems, or the alleged payoff, or payback, I should say, of Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, and how he was really the ultimate decider-in-chief, even when Alan Weisselberg and Michael Cohen were conferring, for instance, right? They were always, it seems, going to Donald Trump, according to Michael Cohen's testimony, when it came to questions and or answers as to what to do with these stories, especially, by the way, Hal, and you well know this, in the lead up to the election in November.
You know, we talk about the political component here. There's also, when we talk about the legal component, Laura, prosecution wants to show Michael Cohen connects the dots. The defense is like, well, wait a second. I'm sure what we'll see on the cross, Their perspective is that Michael Cohen is like the least reliable narrator. And as our colleague Tom Winter points out, he has acknowledged Michael Cohen not telling the truth to a whole lot of people, multiple congressional committees, Robert Mueller, federal prosecutors, FBI agents, the judge to whom he pled guilty, several in his own book, right? Walk us through, based on your legal reporting here, how you see the defense going after this question of Cohen's credibility in front of the jury, perhaps tomorrow late in the day, maybe on Thursday. What's your sense?
I think they'll take direct aim at any of his past lies and ask the witness, were you lying then or are you lying now? And that's a really tough place for Michael Cohen to be in. And it's a really tough reason that prosecutors, as the former president has pointed out, for a long time, Hallie didn't want to bring this case because they knew that this is where they would find themselves with Michael Cohen on the witness stand, forced to contend with this stuff, right? This is the reason it was called the zombie case for so long, because they recognized it could have jury appeal having to do with a sex scandal, but they also knew they only had Michael Cohen as the linchpin. And that we've talked about before, sort of the backup and the other corroboration that would be for Cohen's testimony. And we did see today call logs that I had not seen before, sort of laying out all the times that he was calling the former president, which he says, it doesn't show the context, but he says it was times, again, he was keeping him apprised of what was going on. And we saw all of those along with the jury today. Again, it's going to come down to credibility.
Laura Jarrett, live for us there in downtown Manhattan. Laura, I'm going to let you go. I know you got Nightly coming up. Yaz, before I let you go, just real quick, your biggest takeaway from today, and what are you looking for tomorrow?
I'm going to be looking for cross-examination, honestly, because Michael Cohen, as Laura just talked about, did incredibly well, it seems, on the witness stand. And he performed differently, prepped, I think, than we expected.
I mean, this was not
Michael
his first
Cohen
time.
to, in fact. Well, yes. Yeah. He was prepped, but we know Michael Cohen well, right? We've seen him on television. We've seen him in many interviews. I think we expected a different Michael Cohen than we actually saw. And I actually go back, Hallie, to the judgment, the Trump civil fraud judgment from Judge Engoron, in which he actually said in that judgment, Michael Cohen was credible to me, right? And I think to a certain extent, as we anticipated Michael Cohen's testimony, we kind of underestimated how he would perform on the witness stand. That being said, when it comes to the cross-examination, when it comes to defense, I'm going to be looking at how they go at him and how they kind of poke holes in his testimony. Because, again, as Laura just said, this is going to come down to a he said moment, because Alan Weisselberg will not be called to the stand. And he's the one that could corroborate, really, Michael Cohen here.
Yasmin Vasugian, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Got to take you down to Baltimore now. Look at the scene here right as we're coming on the air. Crews blowing up part of that bridge that collapsed when a cargo ship hit it a couple months ago. Watch this. That boom, that noise you just heard, that was the sound of crews setting off the explosion. The moment that happened to break apart that 600-ton steel beam that you just watched fall into the water. After this moment, of course, the bridge back on March 26th collapsing on top of the Dali cargo ship after the ship collided with one of the pillars at the base of the bridge in late March. What we're about to show you next, some new body cam video we're just getting in from that night. Watch.
Dude, this is bad. Like there is no bridge. Like there is no bridge.
You can hear the shock in that first responder's voice from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources when he sees what is happening in those overnight hours. The collapse, deadly, of course, killing 6 construction workers who'd been filling potholes on the bridge that night. Just last week, crews recovered the body of the final missing victim, which is why they moved forward with the demolition today. George Solis is there. He is there for us live. After what happened today, a critical moment in the process to try to get traffic moving through the river again, to try to get the ship cleared out. Right, George?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right, Hallie. I mean, what a feat of engineering we all got to witness here, watching those precise cuts that they made and those charges go off, to watch that steel span that was on top of the dolly actually slide back into the Patapsco, allowing the ship to be freed. Over the next 2 days now, officials telling us they plan to float the dolly back to the port of Baltimore. That crew's still on board. We're told they were safely on board underneath the deck there when this controlled explosion occurred, and now they're basically going to chop up what's left of the span there in the water and then get that all out of the way so that the channel can fully reopen. The timeline's still aggressive. They're hoping by the end of the month. And as you remember, they were opening up temporary channels around the dolly so vessels could go in and around, so it wasn't a complete stop. like it was when this initially happened. But obviously, again, to witness this here, to watch those charges go off, it was a very loud boom from what we heard. And then, of course, we now saw the span there in the water, Hallie.
I mean, I'm looking at it behind you, George. You know, the river, this is such a crucial waterway there for folks, not just in Baltimore, but up and down the East Coast. And obviously, of course, to the 21 people still on board the ship, still on board the Dolly. They have not been allowed to leave since the bridge collapsed. That's because of the investigation, right? They've been questioned by investigators about what happened. What's next for them?
Yeah, so once the Dolly actually makes it back to the port, it is expected that those 21 crew members will actually be able to finally dock, and presumably that will be part of the investigation. Remember, the NTSB is probing this, so is the FBI. And you're talking about, again, just the financial impact here. We know, according to officials, this is going to take billions of dollars, 1.5 to 1.9 over the next 4 years to try and rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And you're talking also about the millions of cargo that were passing through the port every day, 100 million to 200 million, and then 2 million in wages at stake every day while this has all been ongoing. So again, the priority, and we heard from Governor Wes Moore today saying this is not just about the nostalgia, it's about the necessity to make sure that all of this goes off without a hitch. And again, a big crucial part of that today, Hallie, right there in the Patapsco River, now that this span is off the Dolly, and that, again, they're able to move this cargo ship back to the port.
George Solis live for us there in Baltimore. George, glad to have you. Thank you. Tonight, more than 20 million people are at risk for really intense weather, with new thunderstorm warnings popping up from Texas to Florida. I want to show you this lightning strike in Houston. So the strike and then an apparent explosion. In another part of Texas, you had hail the size of golf balls coming down. Look at that. Out east, look at the scene in the Florida Panhandle, just getting whipped by a ton of rain, a ton of wind. Some spots are even under tornado alerts. NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns is looking for more. What's the latest, Bill? What's in store?
The South has just been, one day after another. Over the weekend, they had storms. They're doing it today. We're going to do more tomorrow. It started off rough this morning in areas, especially around Mobile, heading towards Panama City. And now all our focus is heading towards the Lake Charles area. But all of these storm reports in the white is where we have the hail. Where we have the blue is where we've had wind damage reports. We've had 2 tornado reports today, one in Missouri, kind of a random storm all by itself on a golf course. The tornado did drop down, but it didn't do any damage, so that's great. And then we had a water spout that moved on shore here in the Florida Panhandle. So let me show you what the areas of concern are today. It's right hugging along the northern Gulf Coast. That's where it's still warm and humid enough. And we've been watching these storms moving from the Houston area, heading towards New Orleans. That's the area of greatest concern over the next probably 3 to 4 hours. Large hail is a big possibility, maybe a few baseball-sized hail as we go throughout the night. Wind damage and isolated tornadoes also, and that's what we're dealing with. So the severe thunderstorm watches go until 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. We'll probably get an extension here, including the New Orleans area, and a little bit. Let me show you this line of storms. So Houston, you're in the clear now. You're done. Just some light rain. Pretty strong storm right over Galveston Island with a severe thunderstorm warning. But this line, as it's blowing through Lake Charles, we actually have 2 tornado warnings with this now. They're radar indicated. They haven't been observed. But Lake Charles, you're good. You've seen the worst of this. And now this line is heading towards Jennings and Lake Arthur. 2 tornado warnings, radar indicated. And along with it, even if you don't get a tornado, up to 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts as that storm system goes down I-10. And it's been raining so much in these areas. We have flash flood warnings just north of Beaumont here into Louisiana. And we'll have to watch New Orleans later tonight when the storms go through your area to see if any flash flooding develops. 8 million people are included in that. And Hallie, again, by the time we're done tomorrow, another 1 to 3 inches of rain. This area has just been soaked all spring. They've had enough.
They cannot catch a break. Bill Cairns, thank you very much for tracking all of it. Tonight, thousands of people have been forced to evacuate across Canada because of so many wildfires burning across the country. You see these huge clouds of smoke coming out of the trees. People are just surrounded by all of it. You've got fire crews and emergency workers there prepping for what they describe as a last stand if the fires keep advancing. Some of it's spilling into the U.S. You can see it got a little smoky out in Minneapolis, a little bit of sort of smokiness on the horizon there. Parts of Wisconsin also were under an air quality alert today because of that smoke drifting in from Canada. This is the second year in a row we're seeing some of that. Now, it's obviously not as bad as what we saw in New York. Remember, back in June of last year? That was a huge deal. Jesse Kirsch joins us now. Not the same thing, but obviously a concern given how early Canadian wildfire season is already starting to impact the U.S., not to mention all the folks in Canada who have had to leave their homes.
Yeah, and Hallie, one of the things that officials have pointed to is there being drought conditions. And of course, if you have dry ground, that can be of concern when you're dealing with wildfire conditions. Let's take a look at the latest situation that we know of. Reporting showing 142 active fires. This is data as of yesterday. 39 of those fires out of control. 95 of them under control. And you talk about people being evacuated. One community in British Columbia, a small town, officials telling us more than 3,000 people have been told to evacuate. Most of those people, according to the mayor of that municipality, that broader municipality, have evacuated. But some people, they believe, dozens of people, somewhere around 100 or less, appear to have stayed at their homes, Hallie, which can put them in danger and the first responders who are out there trying to fight these fires.
There's also obviously the health impact of the smoke on people there, people across the border, et cetera.
Yeah, and something that we saw earlier today was that smoke making its way from these Canadian wildfires down into the United States, the Twin Cities, parts of Wisconsin, as well as in Minnesota, seeing a haze. And you referred to what we saw last year. The scenes last spring in June of 2023 were apocalyptic in some U.S. cities. Parts of the New York City skyline, downtown Detroit, the Washington Monument were shielded by a cloud of smoke. Not seeing the smoke making that kind of an impact here in the U.S. so far, but of course, we're keeping an eye on that. I spoke with the mayor from that municipality in British Columbia earlier. Here's part of what he shared with me.
What you see in the far distance behind me is not cloud. That is smoke. That is the fire. And so it's from where I'm standing right now, it's about 2.5 kilometers from me. It's a roller coaster. 1 minute it's clear in town, but if the wind stops, the smoke sort of rolls in and lays here in the little bit of a valley that we've got, and then it's really, really smoky.
So that's the direct impact, of course. Right now, the urgency, trying to save lives and save property in Canada. But as that smoke makes its way into the U.S., we had unhealthy air quality in parts of the U.S., specifically the Twin Cities, Wisconsin, earlier today. And that can have impacts on people's health here in the U.S. If you can, one doctor we spoke with earlier advising people to stay inside with the windows shut if they can in that kind of situation. If you have to go outside in that kind of situation, you might want to consider masking up. But again, we're not seeing that broadly at this point here in the U.S., but it's something to keep an eye on, Hallie.
For sure. Jesse, thank you.
Yes, for sure.
Tonight, a stunning split screen just blocks from where former President Trump was sitting in a courtroom, as we talked about at the top of the show. A few blocks away, you've got New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez's federal bribery trial getting off to an absolute slog. 0 jurors picked as you see the senator leaving the courthouse in just the last hour. As we get our first look on how he plans to defend himself. The question now on everybody's mind, will Senator Menendez throw his own wife under the bus to try to prove he's innocent? He's facing a grand total of 18 federal charges, most of them felonies related to allegations he accepted gifts for political favors. Menendez's wife is accused alongside her husband. Her trial is separate, though. It's happening later on. And the gifts coming in the form of all this stuff investigators said they found in clothes and closets around the senator's house in Jersey. Nearly $500,000 in cash, gold bars, a new Mercedes. All of it allegedly given in exchange for what prosecutors call Menendez official acts as a lawmaker and as the head of the powerful Foreign Relations Committee. Now, back on the day these charges were announced, NBC News caught up with Bob Menendez. Ryan Nobles actually catching him right as he was getting into the elevator, asking him about not just the charges, but about the chorus of calls from his fellow senators to step down.
Why won't you resign, sir, Senator Menendez?
Because I'm innocent.
What's wrong with you guys?
Why were there gold bars there?
A few months later, he declared his innocence not in an elevator at the Capitol, but on the Senate floor, saying he was entirely innocent of the charges against him. Ken Delaney is outside court in New York City for us. At this point in the day, we knew court would be over, right? If 6:22 Eastern time, if you had asked us maybe 12 hours ago, we would have said, hey, maybe there's a chance. We know court will be over. They could be in opening statements. We're not even close. There has not been a single juror picked. Is it taking a surprisingly long time, or is that just our imaginations?
It is surprising, Hallie. And for example, of the 102 prospective jurors who came into court, it took them a half hour to get into the courtroom. And then many of them raised their hand and said they had a problem with the 6 to 7 week trial. And so the judge chose to interview each one individually for 5 minutes in his chamber. So that's what's taken all day. He's excluded 38 people. He's summoned 50 more prospective jurors. And so we may have another day of jury selection before we get to opening statements.
The whole point of it, though, I mean, part of the reason why opening statements are going to be so interesting is because it's going to give us a clue as to the defense Menendez will lay out. With that question, will he essentially blame his wife for all of it? Do we know if he will yet or not?
We don't know for sure. We know that his lawyers laid the groundwork and raised that possibility in court papers. And just looking at the evidence in the case, it would seem like that would be the smartest strategy. But of course, that's a complicated thing, right? They're married. Apparently, it's a love match. And she has an illness, an unspecified illness, which is why she is not on trial right now. So we're not exactly sure how far down that road he's going to go. But the evidence does show that she was heavily involved in soliciting these alleged bribes and in arranging for official acts. There are text messages from her. There's testimony about her. And so if he does choose to mount that defense, he'll have a lot of opportunity to do that, Hallie.
Menendez faced similar bribery charges back in 2017 in a case that ended in a mistrial. Knowing what you do about both sets of charges, what is the sense from the folks you're talking to about whether the government is bringing a stronger case now than they did 7 years ago?
It's a much stronger case, and also the law on bribery has changed. Back then, it wasn't clear that you had to prove a quid pro quo. What they alleged back then, and this was, they were saying that Senator Menendez was, again, doing favors for a friend, an eye doctor, who had huge Medicare contracts, in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars in political contributions, but they didn't allege a quid pro quo. In this case, they are alleging a quid pro quo. They say they have evidence that the bribes were paid for specific official acts by Senator Menendez. And also, it's just they have much more evidence of different things that he allegedly did for the money, including helping the governments of Egypt and Qatar, which is a serious, serious allegation for a U.S. senator who is chairing the most important foreign policy committee.
Just real quick, Ken, only like I just saw a news truck drive by behind you, and I would normally think like, oh, probably there for Senator Menendez's trial. That's not even the biggest trial happening in a 6-block radius where you are.
That's right. So Donald Trump is on trial just a few blocks from here, and that makes a sitting U.S. senator accused of bribery second fiddle, Hallie.
What a world. Ken Delaney, and thank you very much for all the reporting. We will talk again, I am sure, very soon on this one. Appreciate it. Overseas now, concerns about a turning tide in the Ukraine war tonight as Russia makes advances both on the battlefield at home and across Europe, conducting an alleged widespread sabotage campaign on Ukraine's partners, according to experts, trying to undermine Western support of its country, of Ukraine, rather, in its now years-long war. It's all playing out in just the last several months. An arson plot on a Ukrainian-linked warehouse in the UK. In Germany, an allegedly Russian-backed scheme to blow up or set fire to military bases. In the Czech Republic, the hacking of railway signals and ticketing services. And over the Baltic Sea, thousands of civilian flights have reported something jamming the signal on their GPSs. The underlying goal, make Ukraine's allies pay for helping the war effort and try to slow down any future help. It's all happening as President Vladimir Putin makes the biggest personnel shakeup of his war on Ukraine yet. He's now removed the defense minister overseeing the war, a guy who'd been in that post for like a decade. NBC's Matt Bradley is following this for us. Let me take those sort of two buckets here, and let me start with those personnel moves. Why are those happening? What is Putin trying to achieve? And what is the, if you will, Kremlinology of it all? What signals does that send?
Yeah, well, it's not going to surprise you, Hallie. There's different explanations for both. I mean, the real thing here, the official explanation from the Kremlin, and we heard it from Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman today, saying that basically Putin believes that the Russian economy needs to be on more of a war economy. So now that he's bringing the economy minister, or the deputy, it was the deputy prime minister at the time, but he has an economic background, bringing him to cover the war portfolio, he's kind of combining the two. And Peskov said that this is important as Russia's internal security and external military costs rise to nearly 8% of GDP. But also there's another even more direct, more simple way of looking at this. This is a man who stewarded Russia's economy through what could have been, but what wasn't, one of its toughest chapters in its history, when it faced some of the worst, most serious sanctions ever put on any country ever in world history. That's what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022. The economy could have collapsed. It didn't. So Putin sees a success story in this man for stewarding the economy. Now look at Sergei Shoigu, the Minister of Defense, he has not been so successful. This war was supposed to be a breeze. The Russian troops were supposed to put Ukraine on its back within hours or days. They were widely lauded, including by people like me who were there at the time, as the second most powerful military in the world. And so far, it's been caught in just gridlock in the eastern part of the country, even though that's been changing, as you mentioned, over the past couple of days. But really, Shoigu hasn't been a success. He's being replaced by a man who was. It can be as simple as that.
Then there's this sabotage campaign, this idea that Russia is trying to make Ukrainian allies feel the pain a little bit for not supporting Russia here. Talk us through that.
Yeah, Hallie, I mean, I'm sure you're wondering, like I was, why haven't I been hearing about this massive campaign of sabotage that's been crisscrossing Europe for the past couple of years? And that's what we've been seeing reported. This started 2 weeks ago with a report in Chatham House. And basically, we're hearing from different parts of European intelligence agencies describing something that hasn't really happened. That's why you haven't seen spectacular terror attacks or sabotage attacks of the kind that it sounds like we're seeing. Instead, it's mostly arrests, as you described, mostly uncovering of plots, but a lot of the objectives here, it is sort of to spread chaos throughout Europe in the same way that we've been seeing Russian sort of bots kind of do attack people online and it's kind of spread misinformation. It's more of an in real life corollary to that. But at the same time, this is a lot about expanding networks, about expanding Russian criminality, expanding control and recruiting agents. There was a lot of people who were arrested in various events that you ran through just a moment ago. Reconnaissance, sabotage, these kinds of low-level harassment that haven't yet blossomed into a full, massive campaign of sabotage like the kind we might be expecting. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us there overseas. Matt, it's great to have you and your reported analysis on that. Appreciate it. Coming up, a surge in stocks giving major 2021 vibes. We'll tell you what the guy at the center of a pandemic meme stock craze has to do with it. Plus, a big surprise from one of the world's most famous philanthropists. Why Melinda Gates says she's stepping away from the Gates Foundation. Next. The trespasser making a pretty bold trip back to the rapper's house he broke into. We're going to tell you why in the 5 things. But first, in Louisiana, the reverend of a church there getting choked up today after his congregation avoided a potential mass shooting when a teenager with a rifle showed up at the entrance with about 60 kids inside the building ready to receive their first communion. Watch some of the aftermath here. You saw the priest and his clergy ducking behind the altar. Worshippers stopped the teen from getting into the building. They took him all the way outside where police arrested him. Church services picked back up as usual today, but listen to the emotion in the Reverend's voice during prayers this morning.
And I'd like to pray the Memorare together. Remember, O most gracious Virgin.
Could barely speak there. Priya Shruther is following this story and joins us now. What else do we know about what happened here, about this teenager, about what went down?
Yeah, Hallie, just terrifying moments captured on camera. As you mentioned, a 16-year-old white male dressed in all black was the suspect that was apprehended. As you mentioned, members of the congregation were able to take him outside, where he was then taken to the Abbeville Police Department, where he was interrogated by police officers there with a parent before he was transported to the Abbeville General Hospital's behavioral health unit for an evaluation. He's now being charged with 2 counts of possession of a firearm for a juvenile and also terrorizing a church. The FBI is investigating this case along with the Vermilion County Sheriff's Office. So there's still a lot of questions about exactly what the motive is, if he had any connection perhaps to the people inside of that church. But that's what we know about the suspect so far, Hallie.
And then obviously the response from the church, just an incredibly emotional moment for so many who were there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you saw on that live stream about 48 minutes into that service, someone walks up to the pastor and whispers into his ear, and he then asks everyone to sit down. And then he starts praying the Hail Mary. And that's when all of that chaos erupted that you guys just saw. But now the church is actually saying that they're going to be having an armed security guard outside of all of their masses to prevent something like this from happening again. But as you saw today, very emotional at the mass there at the St. Mary Magdalene's Church in Abbeville.
It's also not the first time that we've seen, this shooting, thankfully, was averted, but there have been other deadly shootings at churches, at houses of worship in the last few months and years.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go back to 2012, there was a mass shooting at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin, a Gurdwara, where 8 people were killed. And then you probably remember a few years later in 2015, a shooting at Charleston Church. That one was racially motivated. There was a white supremacist who ended up shooting 9 people and killing them. And then the most significant mass shooting at a house of worship was at Sutherland Springs, where 27 people were killed back in 2017. And then you remember in 2018 at a Pittsburgh synagogue, 11 people were killed. So, you know, this is something that affects all houses of worship, no matter the faith. And a lot of the leaders in these different houses of worship are having to make the tough decision as to whether or not they want to have armed security guards outside of their services, Hallie.
Priya Sridhar, thank you very much for that reporting tonight. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the first person to receive a genetically modified pig kidney transplant is now dead 2 months after the procedure. Rick Slayman got the transplant back in March at age 62. Doctors say they thought the kidney would last for at least 2 years. As of right now, there's no indication Slayman died as a result of the transplant. His family thanking doctors for giving them, in their words, 7 more weeks with Rick. Number 2, the shares of GameStop spiking something like 70% today after the guy named Roaring Kitty posted online for the first time in several years. Remember, this is the guy who inspired that wild short squeeze back in 2021. Things were so volatile at the time that trading in GameStop was halted. Happened today a bunch of times. Number 3, New York City police are looking for somebody who they say randomly punched actor Steve Buscemi while he was out walking around New York in the middle of the day. You're looking at the man police say they want to talk to in connection with this. Police reportedly found Buscemi bleeding and bruised after getting a 911 call. A spokesperson for the actor confirmed what happened. They say he's doing okay. Number 4, the University of Iowa women's basketball coach says she's retiring after 24 years leading the Hawkeyes. She had back-to-back appearances, Lisa Bluter did, in the national championship game, and of course coached star player Caitlin Clark in her last couple years. Bluter says, "It's been the honor of my career to be a part of the Iowa Hawkeye family." Number 5, Melinda French Gates says she's stepping down from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation next month. She'll get more than $12 billion out of the exit to put towards supporting women and families. She says it's not a decision she came to lightly. Bill Gates, in a statement, says he's sorry to see Melinda leave, but assures she will have a huge impact in her future philanthropic work. Coming up, the American arrested abroad for allegedly trying to smuggle scorpions and spiders. Plus, why the Secretary of State is now hitting Israel with some of the toughest criticism yet since the war in Gaza started. Israel hearing warnings from all sides tonight that if they go ahead with their plans to advance in Rafah, they will not face simply a civilian catastrophe, but some international serious consequences as well. The Secretary of State offering some of the toughest talk yet we've heard from a U.S. official publicly, saying in a pair of interviews Israel has to, in his words, get out of Gaza, and that the Israelis have, I'm quoting here, no credible plan to protect civilians. All of it, as President Biden says, a full-scale invasion would be a red line when it comes to U.S. arms deliveries. A lot of officials also saying tonight the situation in Rafah is about to get way worse. The UN says nearly 360,000 already displaced Palestinians evacuated the city. Hundreds of thousands more are still there. And for those evacuating, it's a question of where, if anywhere, can be safe, with fighting also happening in the north, that in areas that Israel once deemed clear for people to go to. Again, the concern over civilian casualties paramount for so many. NBC's Richard Engel has more.
Fighting has broken out once again in northern Gaza. This is an area that Israel claimed it already cleared out, that it already destroyed Hamas's battalions in and around Gaza City. But now Israel has resumed airstrikes in Jabalia, which is right next to Gaza City. It's actually connected to Gaza City, showing that Hamas has been able to regroup. And it is devastating for the people who are living in Jabalia because the fighting had moved on from there. So with the belief that it was safer, people had started to move back to their homes if they could find their homes. There's a lot of destruction in Jabalia, and now those people who had moved back are finding themselves leaving Jabalia once again. Now, in the deep south, that is the main focus of the Israeli military campaign against Hamas right now, in and around the city of Rafah. Rafah is right along the Egyptian border, We still do have a crew in Rafah, and all day they have been talking to people who are fleeing their homes. They were told to evacuate by the Israeli army. Israel has been sending out SMS messages, dropping leaflets, telling people to move to an area along the Mediterranean coast. According to the UN, more than 350,000 people have already left the Rafah area trying to find safer areas. But people that our crew have been speaking to have no confidence that where they're going to be going is any safer than where they are right now. They are also angry with the United States. They heard President Biden warn Israel several days ago not to go into Rafah. They heard President Biden say that the United States would withhold weapons from Israel if Israel moved into Rafah. Yet Israel is now carrying out strikes in the center of Rafah. People are leaving from central Rafah. Israeli troops so far haven't pushed in with heavy weapons and tanks into the most densely populated parts of Rafah. They are still concentrated mostly in the eastern part of the city, but evacuation orders have been given for large parts of the city, and people are trying to move any way they can to try and find what they hope will be a safer area. But I can tell you there is a great deal of frustration, a great deal of anger after people have moved time and time again from the north, then to the center, and now finally to the south, to the Rafah area, only to be told they were safe there, only to be told they'd be protected by the United States if they stayed there, and now they're finding themselves on the move yet again.
Our thanks to Richard Engel for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of other international stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to all of them, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Australia, a plane making an emergency landing today with no landing gear. Look at that. It's coming onto the runway, no wheels, just kind of skidding along the tarmac. Police praised the pilot for a successful landing. It happened after the plane circled the airport for several hours, burning off fuel. Apparently nobody was hurt. Out of Turkey, a curator at the American Museum of Natural History there has been detained for allegedly trying to smuggle poisonous spiders and scorpions out of the country. You see it there. That's according to state-run media. Police arrested the man at an airport in Istanbul. The man says he had permits from the country's government to conduct research. Out of Nepal, one of the most skilled climbing guides on Mount Everest scaled it for the 29th time, breaking his own record for the most time summiting. Expedition organizers say the Sherpa was in good health when they got to the peak, but no surprise, last year he climbed Everest twice. He's actually climbed it every year since 1994. Just incredible. Coming up, the new title for Prince William, creating some new controversy after that royal rift with his brother. Plus, the pretty bold move from Netflix, its latest play on the field of streams. Next. Over in the UK, King Charles is handing over a big military role to his son. A bit of a controversial move because it makes Prince William the ceremonial leader of the unit his brother, Prince Harry, served with in Afghanistan. Look at that. You see both the King and Prince William appearing together today. Remember, we haven't seen the two of them together publicly in a while, with both the King and William's wife, Princess Kate, in treatment for cancer. Here's part of what King Charles said, handing over his title of Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps.
All I can say is that having had the pleasure of knowing you for so long, I do hope you'll go from strength to strength in the future with the Prince of Wales as your new Colonel-in-Chief. The great thing is he's a very good pilot indeed.
I want to bring in NBC Royal contributor Katie Nichol for more on this. Katie, we're glad to have you. So start with, the way palace observers are looking at the significance of the King giving this role to Prince William. How should we be reading it?
Well, given that it's Prince Harry's former squadron, I mean, I think that speaks for itself. I suppose Harry would be thinking, well, if anyone should be getting that very prestigious title, it should be him, because, of course, he fought in on the front line in Afghanistan in Apaches. He served 2 tours of Afghanistan. Yes, William's been a pilot. He piloted with the RAF and then later with Search and Rescue. But I mean, this is a really prestigious title. This is Colonel-in-Chief of the Army Air Corps. He was awarded a special beret from his father today in a very sort of prestigious ceremony, and of course got to fly that Apache. And I can only imagine that Prince Harry, if he's even watching this, will be thinking, right, well, I didn't get an audience with my father, the king, while I was in the UK. I haven't spoken to my brother. He's bypassed the UK without so much as any contact with his family. And I suppose there's a sense of sort of rubbing salt into the wound that a title he would have absolutely loved has gone to his brother. But I suppose that's what comes of being out of the royal family rather than in.
Is it too harsh, Katie, to call this potentially a slap in the face to Harry, or is that what it is?
I think it probably feels like a slap in the face for Prince Harry, to be perfectly honest. But he's not a working member of the royal family, so he cannot take these titles. If you remember, he wasn't actually able to wear his military uniform for the Queen's state funeral. When you step down, when you relinquish being a working royal, there are a number of privileges that go with that. The uniform is one. The military honours is another. And so it might feel like a slap in the face, but it's just the reality.
So what is the reality now of the relationship between Prince Harry and his father? I mean, you mentioned it, Katie, that when he came and visited for a charity event of his own last week in the UK, he was there. He obviously lives in the U.S. now. He did not see his father. We know that even his charity back here in the U.S., the California AG, apparently considers him and Meghan's charity delinquent because of some record-keeping issues or what have you. So where do things stand with the Harry of it all, if you will, right now?
Well, I think the distance with his family is very clear. I'm told that, while Charles wasn't able to make time in his schedule, he was obviously able to make an appointment with David Beckham, again, possibly another slap in the face for Prince Harry. I mean, Charles attended a very important garden party at Buckingham Palace. That was clearly his priority. And don't forget, he's just had to take time off of work as he undergoes cancer treatment. So he's very keen to resume his official schedule. But when you consider that Harry was over here for 3 days, I think it does seem unusual that no time could be made. Obviously, the king has a busy schedule, but I think it does show where his priorities are. And his priorities are obviously being back on public engagements, perhaps rather than trying to heal a rift with his son. So on this occasion, it didn't happen. And you mentioned Archewell. This seems to be a bit of a storm in a teacup. We understand that Archewell have filed their tax returns, but there is a cheque that has apparently gone missing in the post. As soon as that cheque is received, I don't think the firm will be considered delinquent. It still seems to have quite a lot of money in its latest accounts and is, as we know, giving out grants. So I expect that that's going to be on the agenda as soon as the Tussexes touch back down in LA.
Katie Nichol, we're glad to see you. Thank you very much for walking us through all of it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the show, Netflix and the NFL, how the streamers taken a page out of the linear playbook by setting their sights on live sports. We'll talk about the field of streams coming up. Netflix could be making its biggest move yet to make more money by getting into the live sports game, looking to get the rights to exclusively stream 2 NFL games on Christmas next season. Netflix management has said live stuff like this gives them a chance to create what they call cultural moments, right? These moments that matter not just to viewers, but to advertisers. Just the latest in a long list of live event trial runs for Netflix. Back in January, they nailed down a 10-year deal with the WWE to air Monday Night Raw. You've also got the company leaning into live comedy. I'm sure you've seen the clips from the roast of Tom Brady. There have been other specials, too, just recently. Alex Sherman is joining us now. Okay, so Alex, NFL, we've talked about this a lot, right? Football is big business. It is a big deal. It's still a big draw. But Netflix previously, I think one of the Netflix execs last year had said, we don't want to spend a ton of money on live sports. That has obviously shifted, or is at least in the process of shifting. Why?
So, yeah, that was co-CEO Ted Sarandos, who basically said, look, we're not anti-sports. We just haven't figured out a way to make sports profitable. So I can confirm that Netflix is close, I would say, to doing a deal with the NFL for these 2 Christmas games. Deal is not done yet, but I'd say it's trending in that direction. And look, this is another significant step for Netflix, but it's also a baby step. It's 2 games. It's not a package of games like we've seen Amazon buy from Thursday Night Football. So to some degree, you could say, you know what, this is kind of like just another live event, just kind of like their live comedy specials. But this one happens to be a football game. Now, on the other hand, this is their first real foray into live sports. Netflix has kind of danced around this before. They did sign a big deal with WWE, but they called that sports entertainment. So we've been kind of marching on this path to sports and not quite there. Now we're there, if this deal in fact happens. And that's big because it does suggest a future where Netflix does find a more profitable path into traditional sports.
And it's not just Netflix that's there, as you put it, Alex, right? We have a graphic of some of the other deals that other platforms have made. It's all happening as you're also starting to see some of these so-called bundles. I'm old enough to remember when you'd go on cable and you'd have, like, you know, ESPN and TNT and Fox or whoever. You'd get your sports off all these different channels. Now we're getting our sports, potentially, in the next few years, off all these different streamers. Is it just the new cable? Like, is there really a cost savings for customers? Or is this simply a new model that looks a lot like the old one? I promise that's not a loaded question. I'm legitimately curious as to how you see it.
Look, Hallie, my day job's CNBC. Cable still helps pay my salary, so I still remember it well, too. The consumer reality is one that, yeah, we're headed toward this kind of rebundling, which may or may not look something more like cable. But the optionality for consumers is much greater than it was in cable, right? Look, if you are a standard cable customer, you pay one price and you get like 350 networks, and you may not watch 330 of them, but you're getting them anyways. In this new world, you'll bundle for sure. And in fact, Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery just announced a bundle where you get Hulu, Disney Plus, and Max. Well, that's three services. And there will be other bundles that will exist with other different streamers for sure. But it is more consumer friendly because you're paying less and you're getting less. There's just going to be a lot of them out there.
Alex Sherman, super interesting. We'll see how this goes, and I know that you will be reporting all of it out for us here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.